I'm Dr. Jeannie Garbarino. I'm Director of RockEDU Science Outreach here at the Rockefeller University. And it's my great pleasure to be here this morning and to introduce today's speakers, Dr. Leslie B. Vosshall and Dr. Benjamin J. Matthews. Yeah. I will say a little bit more about Dr. Yeah, all right. They're very fantastic. I'll say a little bit more about Drs. Vosshall and Matthews in a moment, but first I want to tell you a little bit about Rockefeller history. All right, so transport yourself back like 120 years. We're talking around 1900. Remember, you're digital natives, so you'll have to imagine a time when there's no internet. There are no cell phones. You can't just sort of pull this up and be like, calling your friend and everything like that. Regular landline phones, those things that have the wire attached to them. I was in a hotel over the holiday break, and my mother-in-law was in a hotel room like a couple doors down the hall, and my youngest kid wanted to call my mother-in-law's room, and I had to show her how to use the telephone. It was amazing. So anyway, those landline phones and electricity were just being developed into accessible technologies. So communication was really slow, and information was only available to a select few, if it was even available at all. And so take a second to think. How do you think that these aspects affected public health? So just think about what you think might be the public health situations in those times. So now I want to ask you, who can give me some examples of the major public health concerns during that time? Who has an idea? Raise your hand if you have an idea, or shout it out. I think someone's raising their hand. Okay, yeah.
Polluted water.
Polluted water, very good. Anybody? Yeah. Unpasteurized milk. That actually turned out to be a pretty big issue, definitely around New York City as well. Polio, okay, that's definitely, so you're talking infectious diseases, right? Yeah. Cholera, Tuberculosis, absolutely. So you're honing in on exactly what I want to talk about, and that's infectious diseases. So prior to the 20th century, medicine was more about disease containment and comforting the sick than it was about advancing our understanding and treatment of disease. So on the left, you can see this is the sort of old ambulance. And on the right here, there's a young woman who has tuberculosis, and basically the family is just trying to make her as comfortable as possible because there really was no treatment. And this was, we didn't know anything about how diseases were happening, like the pathogenesis of disease. And we didn't know how to treat it because we had little knowledge. There was little sharing of knowledge because the communication routes were not as developed. And everyone, no matter who you are in life, was at risk to be exposed to infectious microbes should they present themselves. And so this actually included, so here's also the leading causes of death in 1900s. So you have pneumonia, tuberculosis, diarrhea and enteritis, which probably had something to do with infectious diseases and microbes, and diphtheria. And so this the people that were afflicted by these things also included the young grandson of John D. Rockefeller Sr., Jack Rockefeller McCormick, who is here with his family. And he contracted scarlet fever and died a few months before his 4th birthday. Jack's death was a major blow to Rockefeller Sr. Because he was his beloved grandson. His name was John Rockefeller also, so he's named after him. And it inspired John Rockefeller Sr. to do something meaningful for humanity. Rockefeller realized that more should be done to advance medicine and to prevent the spread of disease. And in order to do this, we had to understand the process of disease from a very basic level. So this is John D. Rockefeller and his both philanthropic and spiritual advisor, Frederick T. Gates. So I love the portraits that they used to take back in those days. And so John D. Rockefeller founded the Rockefeller Institute of Medical Research in 1901, which is a dedicated biomedical research institute that quickly became the leader in the fight against disease and in the effort to advance scientific knowledge. So you're sitting in somewhere that's very historic. And so this is an old picture, and the drive is where you came up, and that's Founders Hall. This is the hospital. And you're here somewhere, like right around here. It's not built yet. And this is what it looks like today. And so now Rockefeller scientists conduct basic and clinical research in 82 laboratories here on campus. And their investigations touch on almost every disease or health condition that you can think of. And despite our label as a university, I do want to make it clear we don't have an undergraduate program. You don't come here for college. We only train PhD scientists who, like most scientific trainees, pay, how much do you think they pay in tuition? How much do you think it costs to get a PhD? Throw out a number. Somebody already has it. It's zero. It's $0. So it's a really amazing opportunity. And you get a stipend, by the way. So not only do you pay $0, you get a stipend to perform research at your institution, including here at Rockefeller. And you get access to things like healthcare and subsidized housing. So it's a really amazing way to get into science. And so over the years, the work done at Rockefeller has been recognized many times over throughout the world. 25 Rockefeller scientists have been awarded a Nobel Prize, and this is an incredible number, more than most countries combined. And just recently, Professor Michael Young, head of the university's Laboratory of Genetics, received the 2017 Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine. This award recognized his pioneering discoveries about the genes and biochemical mechanisms that underlie the circadian rhythm, your body's biological clock. And I think that one thing that helps to make Rockefeller what it is today is that the scientists here are not afraid to take risks. In other words, they're not afraid to fail. So I just wondered, how many here think failure is a bad thing? Raise your hand if you do. How many people think that failure is a good thing? Raise your hand. All right, you're my kind of people. So at its core, science is absolutely a human endeavor. And when humans are exploring things, especially if it's for the first time, it can get really messy. Trial and error is really how we learn. And it's also how science happens. Now, take another minute or second and think of a time that you failed. What did you learn? So I'm going to share with you my first ever memory of failing, and it's a ridiculously embarrassing story, but I'm going to tell it anyway. So I'm 4 years old. It's 1983, and I was attending preschool at a place called the Williamsbridge Oval Park in the Bronx, where I grew up. During recess, we would play outside in the adjacent park. So this is a current picture of the Oval Park, and that building back there is where I went to preschool. And every day we would come out. The field is way nicer in this picture, but when I went to school, there was a big sprinkler system sort of in the middle. And we would play outside, run around the sprinkler system. There were swings and things like that. And so I was looking at the sprinkler system, which was actually, I couldn't find a picture of the sprinkler system, but it was surrounded by these sort of wrought iron vertical bars. It was sort of this rectangle in the middle. And I was looking at some of these kids, and they were hopping over the fence instead of using the actual entrance. And I was like, wow, I want to do that. I want to be like those kids. And so I thought they looked really cool. And so I walked over, and I tried to hop over them, except I was 4. I was like, I don't know, like 2 feet tall, and I couldn't actually hop over the fence. And so I grabbed each one of the bars, one bar on one side, one bar on the other side, and then I took them and I just slid my head through the bars. And I then proceeded to try to fit the rest of my body through it, only to realize I did not fit. And I was like, oh, okay, let me reverse course here. And guess what? I couldn't, I don't know. It's like some law of physics where a kid can get their head through, but they can't get their head out. I don't know what that's all about. And so my teacher saw that I was in trouble, and then my next memory was her taking like a tub. Back in the day, it's like we always had this stuff, this margarine stuff, because like butter was like a heart disease thing. So she had this like tub of margarine, like Parquet or something like that, and just like grabbed it and was just slipping all over my head. And so I had this like greasy head, and you have these like, you know, a couple of adults like just trying to like yank me out of the fence, and it just wasn't working. And then she realized, you know what, we need some assistance. And so they call the fire department, so the FDNY, and I'm sitting there. People, I am so happy that cell phones did not exist. I would be internet famous for the wrong reasons, I'm telling you. And so 30 minutes they show up, but there was definitely a crowd of people. And because I'm like sitting there like on my knees with my hands like on this bar, all I can see is like a sea of feet and legs, and it's all about cut off jeans and those tube socks pulled up to the knees with like the big stripes that I think are coming into fashion again. You know, it wasn't 1983. And so the fire department finally arrives, and they pull out the hacksaw, and they're like, you know, they tell me to close my eyes, because as they're sawing one of the bars, like right above my head, like the little metal filings are like slipping into my face. So they hacksawed the top of one bar, and they hacksawed the bottom of one bar, and they pulled the bar out, and they freed me. And for a long time, there was a hole in the sprinkler system, and everybody knew that Jeannie Meyer was my maiden name, was the person who got her head stuck in the fence, and that is why there was a hole in the sprinkler system. And so that is my memory of my first failure. And what I learned from this is that there are definitely a lot of ways that you can try to do things, but not all of them are gonna work. And despite that very stupid move that I made, I still grew up to be a biochemist. Okay, so I hope that sort of represents that, you know, it's okay to try new things. It's okay to fail. You can still be something, you know, in the future. And I think that's really helped me in my professional life, which has included scientific training here at Rockefeller as a postdoc, and then launching a new era of science outreach with Rock EDU. And so I was really drawn to Rockefeller's mission when I came to study here as a postdoc, which is science for the benefit of humanity. And as I described, the mission has helped shape so much of what science is today. We have taken this message even further in serving the community with Rock EDU. And the mission of this program is to shape and promote science outreach as a set of opportunities for members of our communities to engage with science as a relevant human endeavor, and to foster a genuine connection with science in our society. To do this, we work at the intersection of basic science research and K-12 science education to create innovative and flexible science resources and programs that promote equitable access to, as well as an appreciation for, the scientific process. These efforts are sustained through a culture of outreach within the Rockefeller community, adding to the long list of reasons why Rockefeller is a really, really special place to work and learn and to visit as students like yourselves. Part of this is this Talking Science lecture series here. This lecture series began in 1959 when it was presented as an annual Christmas, then holiday lecture on science for high school students. It was established by Alfred E. Mirsky, a biochemist at Rockefeller, who was one of the pioneers in unlocking the secrets of the cell nucleus. Dr. Mirsky modeled the lecture on a popular series of science talks for young people, established in London in 1825 by Michael Faraday, who is considered one of the greatest experimenters in the history of science. Here's my Talking Science slide. And so today we are pleased to welcome you guys, students from more than 50 schools from across the 5 boroughs of New York and beyond. Thank you for spending a precious weekend day in pursuit of scientific knowledge. So I just want you guys to give yourselves a giant round of applause. Thank you for being here. So on behalf of the university, I also want to take some time to thank the people who are making this day happen. Firstly, I want to acknowledge Merck for their generous support in helping us to present this program. I also want to thank Sean Davis and his development team for basically spearheading every wonderful aspect of this program. I want to thank the custodial team, the security team, IT, high up there, and just everybody, and of course, Rocky DU, my team will be in the CRC, you'll see them. So thanks to everybody who's made this day what it is. And now I want to take some time to introduce Dr. Leslie Vosshall. Her talk, Why and How Mosquitoes Hunt Humans, will be something that you will remember for a long time. And then she will be followed by Dr. Benjamin Matthews, who will talk about the revolutionary CRISPR gene editing techniques. And I'll introduce a little bit more about Ben when we come back from the lunch break. So Leslie is the university's Robin Chemers Neustein professor and the head of the Laboratory of Neurogenetics and Behavior. She's a role model to many here in the university, including myself, and is just a force that has been working to help provide more access to our programs here. She first came to Rockefeller as a PhD student working in the laboratory of the university's recent Nobel laureate, Mike Young. She also postdoced with Nobel laureate Richard Axel, and I just learned that she did some work in college with Nobel laureate Marty Chalfie at Columbia. So Leslie has a Nobel laureate hat trick going on. And so after graduating Rockefeller, she joined Richard Axel's lab as a postdoc. And in 2000, Leslie returned to Rockefeller as an assistant professor. Since then, her research has focused on the odor perception system of insects, with the goal of understanding how sensory information is communicated to and processed in the brain. Using flies and more recently mosquitoes as a research subject, Leslie has become a world-renowned expert in the study of olfaction, the sense of smell. As you will hear, Leslie and her colleagues are working to answer fundamental questions about why mosquitoes are attracted to some people and not to others. Leslie is a member of the National Academy of Sciences, an organization established by Abraham Lincoln, which elects the nation's most distinguished scientists to provide independent advice and counsel to the government on matters of science and technology. Leslie is also a Howard Hughes Medical Institute investigator, and I'm very excited that you will have the opportunity to hear about her research today. So let's take a moment in thanking Dr. Leslie Vosshall. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm just blown away that everybody got up, put on your winter coats, somehow got here. I have a 15-year-old who is actually a student at a STEM school who's currently, I'm sure, asleep. If we had like a Steadicam in her room, she'd be asleep. So incredible kudos to you for coming. So my job here is to inform and entertain. Strategically throughout today, we'll be giving away incredibly great swag to people who ask questions. Here's a cute, cuddly dengue virus. So watch for that. So Ben and I, we've split the swag in half. So half the swag will go this morning, half this afternoon. All right, so I'm going to talk about the world's most dangerous animal, Aedes aegypti, this beautiful, beautiful, deadly creature. So I hope at the end of this, you will be more informed and entertained about what this creature does. I'll divide my talk into 3 parts. First, 101, just the basics. You have to have a feeling for your organism and be in love with it as we are. So a little bit about the history and the natural ecology of it. Then I'll talk about the diseases and the pathogens that are spread when females do this behavior of biting us. And then lastly, I'll talk about our own work, about how we present an absolutely irresistible stimulus to these females and they come by and hunt us. So first of all, Mosquitoes 101. A lot of people don't know some of the basics. I hope this will be informative. So first, let's talk about the ecosystem. So this is us this week, right? We had horrible weather in the tri-state area. And although we have millions of mosquitoes up in the same building where you'll have lunch, we have a huge room where we grow them. This is where these animals actually like to hang out. And so I think it's important that we get into the mood of the animal. So this is not how they normally like. I'm going to take off all of my nasty New York City winter crap. And so this is how we actually go to work. Ta-da! So this is a beautiful, this Dominican Republic. So all through the Caribbean, the whole belt, the whole tropical belt of the world, this creature is highly relevant to them. And we mimic this in our laboratory by making a room that is just like the Dominican Republic. So a really, really beautiful temperature of about 28 degrees Celsius, warmer than we typically have for room temperature, and then very humid. So we spend a lot of time, people are sweating in my lab all the time. It's really gross and sticky, for which I apologize. So Ben has lived the dream of being bitten and being sweaty and gross for years in my lab. So I just want to, again, the natural history. Here's some really, those of you who are squeamish, just close your eyes for the next little while. So Emily Dennis did some brilliant work in the mosquito, and no longer she's switched to working on something that doesn't bite. But here's just an example of two females landing on her skin and being really interested in her. So this is how we, in some cases, test how attractive we are to mosquitoes. So she's put a glove over her hand and inserted her forearm into a cage. And this next picture is really gross. So they love her. They love her. I've done this also. These are just the good pictures we have. And so you can see they're finding a bit of available space on her arm and just filling up on the goodness of Emily Dennis's blood. Of course, really nasty. Now the good news is because we're all immune tolerized, this actually goes away really quickly. So I'll get a bunch of bites like this and then a couple hours later have forgotten that I've been bitten. So what are these animals? What's the natural ecology of these animals? So they're obviously flying insects. So this is a beautiful female, Aedes aegypti mosquito flying. The females look very different from the males. So the antennae, this is the primary place where they smell us, are elongated and elegant and stick-like. This is a male. And so his antennae are these beautiful feathery appendages. His primary job is to find a female. So those antennae are feathery because they are really taking in information about if you are a female or not. And so because they're aerial insects, they actually mate when they're in flight. And so this is like an amazing acrobatic feat. So this is the female. This is a male who's mating with her while they're flying. And here's another male who didn't make it in time, so he is the loser. So I think a principal misnomer that people have about mosquitoes is that both sexes of this species bite. That's absolutely not the case. So males lack the will, and they lack the anatomy to bite people. I think the will is the more important part of it. They have absolutely no interest in us. But moreover, they lack the anatomy. So how do they live? They feed on, in the lab, they feed on 10% sucrose solution. In the wild, they almost certainly just feed on plant material, plant nectar. So they lack the will and they lack the anatomy to bite people. On the other hand, so this is a male mosquito landing on skin. The only reason that they come to the skin if we put an arm into a cage is because they're trying to find females. So as the females are trying to puncture the skin and eat, the males are constantly pestering them. But so this is a really rare event. If you put your arm into a cage with 500 male mosquitoes, it takes a long time before you get anyone landing on your skin and then they leave. So, and so this is what a female looks like. So she definitely has the will to land on human skin, and she definitely has the anatomy to do so. So this is the syringe-like stylet that is sheathed. So when she gets onto your skin, she'll unsheath this syringe and ram it into your skin. So it's a really specialized, kind of a beautiful structure whose sole job it is to puncture skin and then serve as a sort of a drinking straw to siphon up blood. You guys feeling good? I showed you a horribly inflamed arm with hundreds of bites. All of this is Emily's skin, by the way. She's got beautiful, beautiful photographic subject. So this is a movie made by colleagues at the Pasteur Institute. This is what happens underneath the skin. This is that syringe-like stylet that's punctured the skin and is sniffing around for a capillary to obtain blood. So it is like this fiber optic probe controlled by some sort of mysterious force. And that's amazing, right? It doesn't, the mosquito's on the surface, like it can't see what's going on, but there has to be some sensory component there where this thing is able to find the blood. And you can see it's like the suction is so intense that the whole blood vessel collapses because the suction is so intense. So that's what's going on when you get bitten. It's pretty cool, right? It's a beautiful biological problem. How do they get to the skin? How do they puncture it? And then how do they actually find? If you're a tiny syringe like that, it's not so straightforward to find blood. So they are really highly specialized to perform this behavior. This is what happens at the end. You can see that the female's midgut is vastly distended, so she'll double, sometimes triple her body weight. So that's a remarkable. I weigh 150 pounds, like a 155 after the holidays. So if I, at the lunch, swoop in there and double my weight to 300 in 2 to 5 minutes, right? It's an amazing biological feat for me to distend my midgut abdomen to the point where I have 150 pounds of blood in me, right? Just imagine that this is what they do. It's also really rapid, so we can model this. We can feed them not on Emily, but on sort of an artificial substrate. Here's just a time series of how rapid it is. So you can see her abdomen filling up, filling up, filling up. So this is a time course of a couple of minutes. So they're once they hit something that they want to drink, there's a very, very powerful pumping motion that's actuated that fills their gut. So then there's about a 3 to 4 day period during which the females convert all of this protein, lipid, vitamin-rich liquid that they have pulled from us into the raw materials to make eggs. I still get people who are confused that male mosquitoes bite, right? Because the principle, they're not doing this because they're hungry. We are not a vending machine for food. We are a vending machine for raw materials to produce eggs. So that's a really important thing. Because male mosquitoes don't produce eggs, there's absolutely no reason for them to have the will or the anatomy to bite us. And so this is what Ben Matthews works on, so the process by which a female finds a place to lay eggs. And we've caught her in the act here in depositing little eggs on a wet surface. Okay, and so then these eggs mature into larvae. So if you, in the summer, and I personally cannot wait until summer, so if you go into, even in the tri-state area, even though we don't have Aedes aegypti, we have Culex mosquitoes. So if you have a backyard or if you go into a park where people have let water stand around, this is like an invitation to egg-laying females. They love standing water, and if you look, sometimes you can pass your hand over the top and you'll see movement. Those are absolutely mosquito larvae. So they hang, this is the surface of the water here. They have breathing tubes here, and they hang out, and in our lab, they chew on fish food, but in standing water, they'll feed on bacterial and other plant material. And so then these guys mature into these beautiful pupae that are also motile, so you can put your hand across the top and they freak out and move away. This is a problem we don't study. I think it's a really cool problem. How do they sense a looming hand going over a surface and trigger an immediate deep dive to the bottom? But that's another. I think as a scientist, you want to say, like, God, that is really weird. That's a really weird phenomenon. Is it interesting? Can we study it? I think that's interesting. How do they know that there's a looming hand? And then there's this amazing thing, so that they have to become adults. Adults are terrestrial. They have to make this transition from water to air, which is pretty cool. So here's an animal that is just emerging from the water, right? It's an amazing kind of a physical problem of how you get out of the water and then make the transition to air without getting stuck in the water, like Jeannie getting stuck in the fence. That was a great story. And so now you can see it's almost out, and then it will elongate its legs and stand on the water. So that's the whole life cycle. So this is a newborn animal that's going to get ready to hunt us. So I think the principal reason that these animals are so dangerous to humans, which I'll get to in a minute, is this drive. And I feel sorry for them, right? They're not trying to hurt us. It's just like if they don't double their body weight with our blood, they're sterile. They need the raw materials. They need the protein, the lipid, and the vitamins, the small molecules in our blood to be able to produce eggs. If they don't get a blood meal, they produce no eggs. But what's cool is that they're very fertile. So They need the blood, and then every time they have a blood meal, they produce 100 eggs. So those 500 mosquitoes on Emily's arm, right, they're producing a very large quantity of eggs, which is why you can have, if the conditions are good, if there's lots of humans and lots of standing water, you can get a lot of mosquitoes at certain points during the rainy season in tropical areas. And then important for disease transmission, it isn't just that the female has taken a blood meal from this cartoon human. If this cartoon human is infected with Zika, she takes the Zika-infected blood, converts it to 100 eggs, but then she has Zika also replicating in her, so then when she bites this cartoon human, she'll infect him. And they can do this in the lab. We can keep them alive without too much trouble for 6 to 8 weeks. The cycle is 4 days, so you can do the math. In the wild, they probably have a shorter lifespan, but they probably can go through, clearly they can go through at least 2 cycles because these diseases spread rapidly. All right, so now to the diseases. Okay, true or false? Males, blood feed. Congratulations. That's actually the hardest question because most people still don't get that. So males know blood feed. That's all I want you to take away. All right, so because they have the females have this incredible drive to provide for their children, they need to bite us. And the diseases, the pathogens are hitchhiking on this. The pathogens have hooked into this brilliantly. They've exploited this biology to move things back and forth between insects and people. Ticks do this too, right? You have Lyme disease, hooks into the biology that ticks need blood, so they just exploit that brilliantly, right? So why are they the world's most dangerous animal? They are, right? So if you tally, the Gates Foundation tallied up, 10 people a year, 10 humans a year are killed by sharks, 25,000 people a year are killed by rabid dogs, right? That's a good fact to take back to school. Humans, I think that number fluctuates. Humans kill 475,000 humans, but in any given year, mosquitoes kill 750,000 people. That number is much lower than it was until Melinda Gates and Bill Gates decided to invest billions of dollars into public health research. So most of this is due to malaria, and they have drastically reduced the burden of malaria due to their philanthropy. So we have to thank people who have the financial wherewithal and the commitment to invest in science. So where do these 725,000 deaths come from? So malaria is a really old disease. You can check, I love the Wikipedia page for malaria. Has killed many people for many centuries. Dengue is a newer, this is a viral pathogen spread by our mosquito. Yellow fever, a viral pathogen spread by our mosquito. Zika, a viral pathogen spread by our mosquito. And then finally, chikungunya. So these are all arboviruses. These 4 are arboviruses spread by our mosquito, Aedes aegypti. Malaria is a really important infectious disease. We don't work on the malaria mosquito, but the basic biology of everything I'll tell you is generally the same. And you can see that, this is mid-20th century. These 2 viruses emerged and then spread around the world. So there's a constant reservoir of viruses being produced. And it's a brilliant thing to hook into mosquito biology to spread to humans. So I'm not going to assure you that we're done with the list of pathogens spread by mosquitoes. So again, malaria is the big killer, 500,000 deaths in 2015. That used to be about 1 million before the Gates Foundation, so they've had a huge impact. Malaria has killed a number of famous dictators, writers, popes, so nobody is immune from these diseases. Dengue is a more recently described viral disease. Again, working with my flip-flops, so this color coding is all of these areas where Dominican Republic, right? All of these areas where the mosquito lives and the disease is actively transmitted. And hundreds of millions of people are infected. And being infected with dengue, the death rate is low, 25,000 a year. But has anybody here had dengue? Sometimes it's rare. You have had dengue. Tell me. Can I have a microphone? Yay, a microphone. It's rare to find people who've had these diseases, but it's instructive to hear what it felt like. Are you willing to, I'll give you the microphone if you're willing to tell me what it was like. Are you willing? You don't have to.
Okay.
You can tell me whatever you want.
Okay, so it was when I was very young, and it was terrible. You have like very severe headache and like very, very bad cold, and you can't really get up. Sometimes your like hands and legs hurt. And then a few days ago, because I came from like an Asian country where many people are being affected by chikungunya and dengue and malaria. So my aunt, she had chikungunya and she couldn't even walk. Like all her joints were in so much pain.
Thank you for sharing that. I think it's really, and what I have to say, I'm so excited that I'm going to give you the dengue virus. Again. But this time it won't be painful, I hope. So yeah, these are terrible diseases, right? There's the morbidity, there's the mortality. Being dead is bad, but being sick is also, it has huge effects on economies in these countries. Yellow fever is one of the few, we have a great vaccine for yellow fever. So yellow fever has saved sort of uncounted lives. And it was generally under control until we've had a few outbreaks recently in cases where political disturbances make it difficult to vaccinate people. So this has been a really bright spot in Aedes aegypti spread diseases. We have a great vaccine. And then chikungunya is this interesting case that illustrates how quickly diseases can spread from the point of origin. So the point of origin of chikungunya was this region in coastal Kenya. An individual got sick, they couldn't figure out it was some new virus. They finally analyzed it and figured out that it was indeed a new viral isolate, kind of hung around there, and was then kind of limited to these parts of the world. But at a certain point, 4 years ago, people started getting sick in St. Martin right around the airport. And nobody could figure out what it was, and it was chikungunya. So somehow spread from these parts of the world to the Americas. And what's remarkable is that it took just a little under a year to go from a single case around the St. Martin airport to 1 million cases in the Caribbean basin, South America. And so these things spread incredibly rapidly. And again, because humans are such perfect hosts for these diseases, they then quickly become established. Once you have chikungunya in the neighborhood, it's not going to go away. And then Zika, which was, took the general public and took scientists by surprise. I think it's hard to find someone who's unaware of what Zika is. So Zika also emerged in the mid-20th century. It's named for a forest in Uganda, so it was active in primates, then jumped to people. It's a very common route for viruses to jump from bats or monkeys or other wildlife into humans, as humans encroach on the habitat of these animals. And it didn't cause any big symptoms. The NIH didn't put a single dollar into Zika before about 12 months ago, so it was a virus that wasn't very troublesome. It then began to spread around the world. So in the 70s, you found it in East Asia, Southeast Asia, and then it spread to Brazil. And this is where it caught everyone's attention because it had a new biology. Something happened where you spread the wheel of fortune and the virus acquires a mutation that all of a sudden makes it much more dangerous. And so what the virus caused was, we think there's pretty good evidence now that infection of a mother with Zika sometime in the first trimester causes this devastating neurodevelopmental event where the parts of the brain, the cortical areas that are required for thought, feeling, memories, other sensory attributes, initially form but then are killed by infection with a virus. So this is terrible. And it's a kind of an interesting detective story where there's always a low rate of microcephaly, kind of a birth defect rate of microcephaly that public health agencies tally. And you can see at this point where it just it tripled and then zoom. So this is something that, there's something going on, right? Something really terrible going on where all of a sudden microcephaly went from incidental to drastic, where women were turning up with ultrasounds and with live-born infants with this devastating failure of the brain to grow. And so it took a while to make the case, but I think now we have really, really clear evidence that the comorbidity of like places that had the most intense incidences of Zika also had the highest incidence of microcephaly. And again, another important point is that most of these diseases don't affect the continental US, but Zika rapidly spread to southern Florida and to Texas, where people think it's likely to be endemic, meaning that it's here to stay, right? So Zika is absolutely here to stay in the Caribbean. Once it's here, you can't get rid of it, right? It's going to be shuttling back and forth between people and mosquitoes. And there'll be times when it's quiet, when you won't hear about it, but then it will come back, right? And I worry about places like Puerto Rico, where Puerto Rico, only half of the island still has power, which means that people aren't going to be able to be inside with air conditioning, which air conditioning is a great way to avoid being bitten by mosquitoes because you're inside. So these areas are going to see more problems with mosquito-borne diseases. Okay. So how do you get chikungunya going from the St. Martin Airport to the entire Caribbean basin in 9 months? It's not because the infected mosquito is flying to Miami and to Venezuela. It's because the people are flying. So you could have a low-grade infection with chikungunya, not be aware of it, go visit your relatives in Miami. The Egypti mosquitoes are waiting, they bite you, and then they spread it, right? So it's human mobility. So first of all, infected humans move around, and then also notoriously, this explosion in the used tire trade means that as people are moving tires around the world, you get mosquitoes moving around the world. So Aedes albopictus, this incredibly annoying Asian tiger mosquito, had not been seen in this hemisphere until about 40 years ago. All right, so why does the used tire trade cause mosquitoes to move around the world? Small amounts of water that are in the tire. That's really excellent. Exactly. So for the females, it's like it's warm, it's wet. They lay their eggs, and then the eggs go on a trip. Sir, can you guys pass that down? A fantastic bit of swag. Congratulations. Thank you. So this is a huge problem. The other thing is if you go to Chinatown and you get those little those bamboo things that have been, you take a piece of bamboo, you put it in a pretty vase, and it sprouts, and you give it to your grandmother. Most of the time in there are some Aedes albopictus larvae that are breathing, and then, right, so be careful of stuff that you buy there. All right, so right now it's really cold in New York, but the Earth is changing, and so all the predictions are that these issues will become more of an issue for us, right? So we have dengue and chikungunya pretty rampant in South Texas and Florida. It's not going to take a lot to bring it up to the southern tier. All right, so with all of these problems, what can we do? So insecticides just kill the mosquitoes. If you reduce the mosquito population, there's fewer mosquitoes biting us. And this works well for a while, but in the genetic population of mosquitoes, there will always be one or two that are resistant to your insecticide. All the mosquitoes are killed except those two. They mate, their children are resistant, and then this becomes completely useless. So Gates Foundation and other charities have been very active in distributing bed nets to people in affected areas. This is a physical barrier, so if these 3 children are sleeping under the bed net, the mosquitoes will not be able to access the baby, so that's great. They're also treated with insecticides as a double barrier. So this has had a huge impact on bringing that number down from 1 million to 500,000, huge impact. However, again, because think of it from the females, like they need the blood for their children, right? So this is a huge selection pressure on the females, like they want to bite those poor babies, but they can't. So what's the solution? If you're that female mosquito, you want to bite those babies, but they're sleeping under the bed net at night. What do? You're hunting at night, normally. What do? Ooh, go to the mother instead. That's a good option. But what do? Like normally these animals are flying around at night waiting for us to go to sleep. Say it again.
Bite them during the day.
Bite them during the day. Perfect. See, you guys are scientists. So again, it isn't like that mosquito says, I'm going to bite them during the day, but there's some in the population of mosquitoes that have altered sleep cycles, and that you select for those that are willing to get up in the day and bite. So this is just showing how the incidence of mosquitoes flying around before bed nets and after bed nets. So if you get rid of mosquitoes, you get rid of disease. And then here is, what's your name? Emma. So these are your data, Emma. So this is just asking like who's biting when. So at the point that bed nets started being, you had 2 years where the number of mosquitoes biting during the day was really, really low. So they're not really biting during the day. And then boom, now there's this huge incidence of them hunting during the day. So then bed nets become useless because you're not going to walk around with bed net. So that's a huge recent shift to daytime biting, presents a huge problem. So they evade it because death is a strong selection pressure, so the insecticide is a strong selection pressure, and the extinction of the species is a strong selection pressure. They need the blood. All right, so I'm going to finish up with some actual data from my lab. How much, where's Sean? How much time do I have? I have like 15 minutes. 15 minutes. And then we're going to have the only interesting part of what we're doing here today is your questions. That's the only interesting thing. I love when I hear how you guys think about things. So we'll have like a half an hour for questions. So my lab doesn't work on the pathogens. We work on the mosquito. We're interested in how these mosquitoes came to find humans so attractive. This is a really instructive experiment from Laura Harrington that asked, how attracted are mosquitoes to humans relative to other animals, right? There's no magic thing about human blood. They could bite house cats, rats, pigs, goats. In fact, when we're not feeding the mosquitoes on Emily Dennis, we feed the mosquitoes on defibrinated sheep blood. So they do fine on sheep blood. There's nothing special about humans. But given, in this experiment, they went into this village and collected mosquitoes whose bellies were distended with blood, and then did a simple ELISA assay just to ask what's the immunotype of the blood. And they found that the vast majority of the mosquitoes, given this smorgasbord of different animals to feed on, fed on humans. So we're really interested in how that happens. And I'll show you a little bit of data that's still raw, but I think interesting, that addresses this very common issue of why are some people more attractive to mosquitoes than others. So, all right, let's do the show of hands. Like, who is a mosquito magnet? That's good. So like about half of you. Who is the lucky person who mosquitoes don't like? It's awesome, right? Everybody experiences this. Okay, why is it? Like, give me a hypothesis. I'll give you the microphone. Why is it? I mean, it is a thing. Why is it? Why are some people more attractive to mosquitoes than others? What have you heard?
Their body odor is different.
Body odor is different. I like that one.
I think the color of the outfits that we wear.
Ooh, I haven't heard that one. Anybody else?
Different blood types.
Ooh, the blood type one. I love that one.
Blood sugar.
Blood sugar, blood type, blood sugar, odor.
Your skin texture.
Skin
Texture.
texture. We didn't test that.
About the amount of CO2 that we are exhaling.
Ooh, amount of CO2, good. So we have texture,
Temperature.
temperature, texture, temperature, CO2,
What they eat.
what they eat. Oh, I'm going to stop there because I think you guys got it all. Texture, I haven't heard, which we didn't test. But so these are the dominant. I think crowdsourcing is a really good way to get hypotheses. So blood sugar, blood type, temperature, CO2 are really the top things. We didn't hear gender. Gender is another thing people say, that women are more attractive babies are more attractive. Those are the sort of top things. Two ideas that we heard are scientifically true. So the amount of CO2 you give out and the amount of heat you give out is absolutely true. So we set out to test this by doing experiments with the Rockefeller University Hospital, by testing people. Here's an example of a subject. This is my postdoc, Laura Duvall. Irene Calbion is about to release a bunch of females here. They're going to fly upwind through this trap. They're not going to bite her. We can't let members of the public be bitten. But you can see here there's like air and carbon dioxide blowing over this piece of skin, and the females are desperate to get to it. And so the person who said, body odor, you have to join my lab because that's what we think it is. Because everybody gives off CO2, everybody is warm to some extent. And so this is what it looks like from the side. So we simply count how many mosquitoes fly upwind to the person. And so this is a problem that they're tropical mosquitoes because the more skin you show, the more attractive you are. Generally, in hot climates, you're showing a lot of skin. So it's an ideal place for mosquitoes. So we just asked on a scale from 0 to 1, if you show just a little bit of skin, you're modestly attractive. The same person, the more skin you show, the more attractive you are. And again, because we're showing them some odor from the skin with the same amount of CO2. It is the odor. It is the odor that governs this. And so this is like the preliminary look at 150 New Yorkers. And so you can see that there's vast differences. So really feel sorry for the two people at the right who are the most attractive people in the study. And then this individual, also very lucky. So we've been looking through to figure out what it is. So these are just statistical analysis of the data. And so we don't find blood type, blood sugar. That's the dominant idea. We don't find any correlation of how sweet your blood is to how attractive you are. We don't find any correlation with age or gender. The surprising, you can already see if it's coded by race here. So because New York City is an incredibly diverse place, the thing that we found is that an incredibly robust predictor of how attractive you are is race. So the Caucasians in this study ended up being, in general, as a group, much more attractive in yellow, and the African Americans here in blue are much less attractive. The data are polluted by all sorts of problems that in our study population, body mass index and race were highly correlated, but kind of food for thought. So race is part of it. Blood type, blood sugar is not part of it, not gender, not age, and we're digging in deeper to figure out what the factors are. You could build a story that because mosquitoes are like a problem in the tropics, that there's some adaptive advantage to people of African origin to be less attractive to mosquitoes, but that's just a fairy tale with no data at this point. All right, so we talked already about what they like about us. So they love, this was the visual idea, which we are studying a little bit. Odor is a huge part of it. I'm sweating right now because I'm moving around. And so I'm pumping out vast quantities of body odor produced by bacteria on my skin. I'm also breathing heavily. That's a potent activator. A colleague up there said that. Heat, we're all giving off heat. That's highly attractive. And we can trick them, right? So any one of those factors alone doesn't guarantee you a human, but this is pretty close to a human. So there's warm sheep blood here. We're puffing in carbon dioxide, and we have some human body odor rubbed on the surface. And the female's totally on board, so she flies over to that little bit, that little surface that is kind of skin-like and punctures, and you can see that her midgut is expanding. So you don't need a lot to convince a female mosquito that something is blood. And so what we think is happening is that they evaluate multiple sensory cues. So just heat is not an honest indicator of a human. Like the lamps up there are very hot. If they flew toward things like that alone, it's not an honest indicator of a human. Carbon dioxide is given off by many other substances. So they put things together. And so we have been trying to figure out what would happen if you eliminated one of these senses, if you made a mosquito that couldn't sense carbon dioxide, kind of blinded with one sense, could it adapt and figure out a way to hunt humans? And the answer is yes. So even though carbon dioxide is incredibly important to these animals, they have other ways to get around it. And so these are the experiments. We know we have 3 genes called GR1, GR2, GR3 that together form a membrane protein that by a mechanism we don't understand at all, somehow tells neurons, sensory neurons, that carbon dioxide is around. And so we just used genome engineering, and Ben will spend the afternoon telling you about genome engineering, so I won't. We made an animal that didn't have GR3. And so what do these guys do when they sense CO2? They love CO2. So these are experiments done by Ben. And so he videotaped a lot of mosquitoes flying around in a box, and then just tracked them in real time. So 3-dimensional tracking of mosquitoes. You see them doing a little bit of lazy flight before you put CO2, and then you inject CO2 and they go berserk. So there's that enormous increase in activity when you pump in CO2. If you get rid of 1 copy of GR3, they're absolutely fine. So 2 copies of the gene, they fly around like crazy. You get rid of 1 copy of the gene, they fly around like crazy. Are there any, so what does that mean? Are there any, do you guys do genetics? What does that mean about the gene, GR3? 1 copy is good. 1 copy is good enough. The gene is, the mutation is, Dominant. It's not dominant. Dominant would mean like, what's the opposite of dominant? It's recessive, meaning that 1 copy, you can make do with just 1 copy. You need to get rid of both of them. The jargon, I hate the jargon in our field. Like it's not, we should have come up with a better word than dominant and recessive, but it is recessive. But when you knock out both copies, you get this. So flat line, no amount of CO2 will get them excited. And so then we can ask what happens to a mosquito that can't sense carbon dioxide. So what's interesting is that in order for animals to be able to sense heat, they need to be activated by carbon dioxide. Puts us into position to ask if there is actually integration of different cues in the brain of the mosquito. And so this is from my former student, Ramon Corfas. This is a box with mosquitoes hanging out in ambient. Then we blast some CO2 in there. This is a little patch on the wall that's warm, and it doesn't have a red line around it. Like to them, it just looks like it's just a cage with no markings. But you can see that the ones who have been activated are crazy to land on that spot. And if you zoom in and see what they're doing, they are trying to bite the side of the cage, right? So just a warm spot and carbon dioxide is enough information for them to say, there must be a human on the other side there. Must be a human. So that's amazing. In their mind, they have this illusion that on the other side of that mesh, which really is just a Peltier element that the computer has turned on, they're convinced it's a human. And so Ramon built a mechanism to track them, so he can just get coffee while the thing is running, and then the computer scores the ones that have landed on the Peltier as being attracted. And what's cool is that, again, they want to have multiple lines of evidence that it's a human. So if you just inject CO2 and ask, are they landing on the spot? They don't, because they're not activated. If you just heat the spot, they don't go. But if you heat the spot and you put in CO2, they love it. So what is the mutant that can't sense CO2 going to do? This is so terrible. I hate when people do this. All right, good, here. So there's 3 data points. There's one where you dump in CO2 and heat and they love it, and then there's one where you dump in heat but no CO2. So what's the mutant going to do? Left, middle, or right?
Middle.
Nice. Nice. Thank you. Exactly. Thank you. It's as if, so the heat is there, but there's no CO2. So it's like they have not, so even though we have only knocked out the CO2 receptor, we have eliminated their ability to sense heat, which is really cool, right? It would be like I close your eyes, and all of a sudden you're not able to sense a lemon, right? It's like this cross-modal requirement. But all this stuff was in the lab, so in the lab, if you get rid of their sense of CO2, they can't sense heat, but it's a very abstract job. So my postdoc, former postdoc Connor McMenamin, went to his native Australia in an area where where dengue is here to stay. So in orange is where our mosquitoes live naturally, and orange is where dengue is. And he went there and flew the mosquitoes in a cage. They're genetically modified, so we can't just fly them, get arrested, right? So we flew them in this cage, which is just a big greenhouse, but it's open to the outside, so the same humidity and temperature. They feel at home there. And Connor released these animals. It's like set up to be like there's plants in the garden, and we just release 100 wild-type mosquitoes and 100 homozygous mutants that can't sense CO2, and we ask, and we have someone sit in a chair here and a chair here, and then ask, can those poor mutants find the human? It's like, find the human. So there's find the human, so here's Connor just waiting for, there's 200 mosquitoes flying around in the house. If CO2 is absolutely required for them to find him, he would get no mutants. He would only have wild-type mosquitoes. So he catches them one by one, and then we genotype them to figure out are they wild-type or mutant. And this experiment was one of the most expensive experiments I ever did. I had to fly Connor across the world and house him for 6 weeks and pay all these people. I had to build like a $20,000 screen door because they needed a new screen. They're like, all right, you can do the experiment, but you have to buy us a new screen door. Now, and the desired result, this is the thing about science, like, you don't want to say desired result because then you're being dishonest, right? Maybe we hope that the result will be that this is the percent of mosquitoes that are finding Connor. So within 3 minutes, half of the wild-type mosquitoes have found him, right? It's really, really fast. What we sort of expected is that the mutants would not find him, but that's absolutely not true. So the mutants are one for one, perfectly good at finding him. So this was like a lot of money down the drain for an idea that, but it's good, it's biology, right? So we always make lemonade out of lemons. We made it a little bit harder for them by testing them at a remote part of the cage, and there was like a teeny tiny effect. This is so lame when people say like, oh yeah, there's an effect. Like statistically there is an effect here, but it's really lame, right? It's a tiny, tiny effect. So we thought like maybe if we had a bigger field cage where we put the person at a very, very far end, we could see an effect to make it harder. No such cage exists, so we switched to mice because you can put mice in a small cage. And again, the mutants were just as good as the wild type at finding the mouse. But now we put the mouse into a cage that's the equivalent of putting a human into like a football field, enclosed football field, and now the mutants are severely impaired. So I think all of this is just to say that these mosquitoes are so good, it's so important for them to find humans that if you just take away 1 sense, they don't care. And part of the study showed like if you give them CO2 and heat, I showed you, they're attracted. If you give them odor and CO2, they're attracted. You give them odor and heat, they're attracted. So they take any 2 cues as an honest signal of a person. And I'm just going to wrap up quickly with one last experiment that's looking at the genetics of heat. I already talked to you about they get excited by CO2, but they're attracted to heat. How does that work? Especially because most insects don't fly up to you, right? It's not like you're not like flying around and a butterfly is coming to attack you, right? It's like a very specific behavior. Most insects desiccate rapidly. They don't want to fly toward a 34°C surface. But these guys do. So this is a thermal camera view of Ramon Corfas. So you can see like he's wearing shorts and he's broadcasting all of this heat on his extremities. That absolutely heat is really attractive, and he's exhaling CO2. So that assay I showed you before with the animals in the box and they're flying around, we're again looking at how many of them are flying toward that patch. And this is a really sadistic experiment because over the course of many hours, we put in CO2 and turn on the heat, and they go. We turn it off, they go again. So they never get sick of this game. They just are so hopeful. They have such hope that they're so hungry for blood that even after many hours, they're like, well, maybe this time there'll be a human arm there, right? And it's very, very sensitive to the temperature. So if you make the Peltier too hot, 60 degrees is very hot, Celsius, very hot. You can see that there's a bit of a maximum here around close to what human body temperature is. And what's amazing is how sensitive they are. So even 2.5 degrees above ambient, they already sense that something is up. So they really are tuned into heat. And you can see this sort of graphically here with these occupancy plots that even at 2.5 degrees above ambient, you start seeing stuff more, and then as it gets super hot, they avoid it. I'm going to click ahead to some of them. All right. And so I'm going to just show you that we have some genetic insights into this. This is a membrane protein called TRPA1, which lots of evidence suggests can sense noxious chemicals and heat. And using the trickery that Ben will talk about, we destroyed the gene by introducing an early stop codon here. And so these animals cannot make this membrane protein, this ion channel that is supposed to sense heat. And then we can ask, what do these animals do if they lack the ion channel? So first we make sure that we've made a mutant, and we ask if they can sense these noxious chemicals that TRPA1 senses by giving them a choice of a capillary with sweet and a capillary with the poisonous chemical in it. And what you find is that, again, it's recessive, the wild type. This is a choice of the poison or the sugar. The wild types aren't idiots. They drink the sugar. The mutant is an idiot, and so fills up equally on the poison versus the sugar, can't sense it. The mutant is able to avoid bitter stuff. So it's a good mutant that is lacking TRPA1. And so the immediate phenotype we see, this is like zooming in on they're flying toward that warm area. When the Peltier is at 50, the mutants like it. They keep hanging out, and they're still attracted to it. So they're unable to recognize that a hot surface is bad, whereas the wild types go away. And you sort of see this here in these data, that the mutants still recognize that warm is good, but they don't realize that hot is bad. So they continue to be ridiculously attracted to heat. And so you can sort of see this here in this last experiment, that a key thing is if you're faced with a human versus some kind of hot something on the ground that should be attracted, that you should go toward the human. And so Ramon offered them a choice of a warm Peltier or a hot Peltier. And so you can see that the wild types, which are flying first here, so hot on the left, warm on the right. There's a few wild types who check it out briefly, but most of them are really excited by the body temperature one there. And so that's pretty cool. So they're able to, many of them don't even check out the 50 degrees. They're just attracted. And so then here is the mutant. It loves the 50-degree surface. So it can't tell the difference. So it likes both of them equally. And that's bad, because if you hang around enough on a 50-degree Celsius surface, that's bad. So the take home here is that TRPA1 is absolutely required to avoid noxious temperatures. And so we imagine that there's something going on in the brain where the mosquito is attracted toward warmth, but that TRPA1 is a kind of a mechanism to prevent it from getting distracted by super hot objects in the environment. So what I've done today is shown you something about the biology of the female, the diseases, the pathogens that she spreads, and then the sensory cues that she takes in, exhaling CO2, releasing heat into the environment, and then the genetics of the mosquito to be able to sense carbon dioxide. And so all of this work has been done by past and current fellows and support staff in the lab, and I just really want to thank you guys for sitting here patiently. Now we get to the good stuff, which is asking questions. Thank you. We've had a lot of questions near the front where I can reach, but I have fantastic colleagues who are going to also do some questions at the back. So ask me anything. But don't ask me if only females bite, because we should know that, right? Sure. We'll stack them up. You, then you.
So, for a long time, my parents always told me to, wear blue, because mosquitoes can't see blue. Is that true?
What do you
no?
think?
I'm guessing no, but can't they still sense that you have body heat?
Yeah, exactly. You can wear whatever you want.
Okay.
Really wear whatever you want. You wear an invisibility cloak. It's irrelevant, right? I think it's irrelevant. So wear what you want.
Okay.
I have the last good piece of swag. We have one over there, and then gentleman here. Go ahead.
Oh, you know how there's data that provided that says that like certain races are more attractive to mosquitoes. It's like, how are the mosquitoes aware of what type of race a person is?
Excellent, because, and that is the fundamental question for which I'm going to give you the last fantastic piece of swag. Thank you. So this is a puzzle. So we don't understand it. It's a very, very robust finding. We don't give them any cues about, someone said skin texture. We don't give them any cues about the pigment of the skin or anything. We just give them the scent. So why do people have different scents? They have different scents because they have different skin bacteria, and the qualities of your skin, like the moistness, all these different properties, and your genome has some sort of an effect on the kinds of smells that you produce. So this is what happens when a scientist does not know the answer and is just flailing, right? I'm just flailing. We don't know the answer, but it has to be something about the smell. Smell is strongly influenced by diet, right? So it could be a dietary effect. That's something that we didn't imprison our subjects and feed them Cheerios for 6 months. That would be the right experiment to do to equalize diet. But so we don't know, but it's fascinating. Gentleman right there.
How does mosquito repellent work?
How does mosquito? We don't know, which is absurd, right? I have one more good one. I'm just going to throw these out. All right. How does mosquito repellent work? Here's some mosquito repellents. I'm a terrible thrower. Woo! Okay. All right, so mosquito repellents, you can put those on. Come to my lab and put them on. Mosquito repellents jam the sense of smell and taste. They taste and they smell terrible to mosquitoes. The details of that are highly, highly fought over, so it's like one of the most contentious. I tend to be a really controversial person, but if you dig through the internet, you can find people saying, Vosshall is dead wrong. She's like, once again, dead wrong about this. So we think that DEET goes in and completely changes how insects perceive smell. There's really good evidence for that from my lab, but it's still kind of an open question. All right. Who else has a microphone?
Microphone in my hand?
Go ahead.
Does the fact that we don't have a lot of hair on our body, that our skin is fairly thin, do these things have to do with the preference for humans over larger animals?
Right. So is it? And we had a couple of thoughts about this before. Mosquitoes will bite through denim. They will bite through clothing, right? So. It may be a factor. I often think about, like, why us? Like, why us? Like, so unfair. Why us? West Nile is spread by a mosquito, Culex pipiens, that really likes birds. Now, I would argue, like, I would rather bite me than a bird, but there are mosquitoes that specialize on birds. The hand-wavy thing that we say is that humans, we have a lot of stuff going for us. We are hairless. We move slowly. It's not like trying to go after some fast-moving animal. We congregate into enormous, explosively, large urban groupings, and we always have water. So I think that those are the things that have been kicked around. Like, if you're like a hyena, you have some of those things. Like, you form social groupings, but you don't have water. So in the range of the mosquito, a hyena is a bad choice because they don't have, like, a cistern with water stored in it like we do.
Can a mosquito stylet get stuck under the skin?
Ooh, we do. I think a normal mosquito doesn't. Because it is an incredible act. The older they get, the more difficult it is for them to do both the puncturing and the retrieval. So that's absolutely the case. But usually, like, the normal, healthy young mosquitoes have absolutely no problems, but it does develop with age. Like, the agility is decreased. And all right, who's next? Who has a microphone? Go. Who has a microphone? Lady with the beautiful bangle earrings.
You spoke a lot about mosquitoes going to great lengths to find humans. If humans evolved collectively to be repellent to mosquitoes, would you say the population growth be hindered?
So if we overnight if we overnight became poor hosts for mosquitoes, I think that we'd have to be really, really, really unattractive to mosquitoes for that to happen. I think that, so if we take the case of the Culex pipiens mosquito that prefers birds, it will still bite people, right? So I think that they're opportunistic. So I think that they would somehow make do with a situation where if we all of a sudden, all of us doused ourselves with a molecule that made us all deeply unattractive, I think that they would still survive. If we doused ourselves with something that made it impossible for them to bite us, they would have to move on, right? They would have to move on, absolutely. It's a great thought experiment. I don't know, what would it take? Now, I want to make sure that we have other, Dr. Dengue, all right, here.
Based on your question about races, is there a correlation between living in tropical areas and how much you're attracting to mosquitoes?
So I don't think so, and I actually really hate that outcome. Like, as a scientist, you can pose the question, you can design what you think is a good experiment, but you can't control the answer. So I actually really hate the answer that there's an incredibly high correlation between African Americans being weakly attractive and Caucasians being highly attractive. So, but I think that in every part of the world, you're going to find this separation between mosquito magnets and mosquito repellent people. That's what you find everywhere. There's been a study done in the Netherlands with 100% like Dutch Caucasians. They still find that separation. So even within a specific ethnic group, you have mosquito magnets and you have mosquito repellents. I think we're just saying, like, in general, in our population, in our 75 Caucasians, just the average attraction is much higher, but we still have in that, you saw that the least attractive person in that study happened to be Caucasian. So we're still trying to, I think the lesson there is sometimes you really hate the outcome of an experiment, but we have to deal with it. I'm ignoring Dr. Dengue. Who has a microphone? Go ahead.
Does the thickness of your blood affect whether mosquitoes find you more attractive?
So they don't know what they're going to get until they bite you, right? So even in that experiment I showed with sheep blood, they don't really know what's there. So I don't think that that's a factor. Moreover, part of the reason you get those itchy bites is because they're injecting anticoagulant proteins into the local sites. I don't think that that's a factor. Has not been studied extensively.
A lot of the conversation seems to be around repelling or killing the mosquitoes, but if we understood the factors that attract them, would it not be possible for us to provide them feeding grounds more attractive than us?
Fantastic, yeah, and a lot of the early work here was powered by the Gates Foundation, and Bill Gates visited the lab twice. It was a lot of fun, like the SUV pulled up with the Secret Service guys. We got him cans of Diet Coke and raw steak, like those are the things that Bill Gates eats. Where I'm going with this is that early on, all of the money was toward developing repellents. And we then realized the challenges of making a repellent because mosquitoes find ways to go around everything we do to them. So then the next big push was attractants to do exactly that. And the answer is that it can work. You can make a trap that's baited with carbon dioxide, that is warm, and that gives off blends of molecules that are human-like, and it works. But you have to put so many of them up around an area that it just becomes, it's not scalable. So that's the challenge, is nobody has found something that is more attractive than a human. If you have a house and you put some number of traps, they're still gonna go after the humans. So it's really, I mean, this is why it's such an old problem, is that they really like us.
Is there a need for mosquitoes? Like, we need bees to pollinate. If we eradicate them, would that hurt us somehow?
So this is a great segue later into Ben's talk, because there's two camps out there. There's the let's kill them all. They're sickening hundreds of millions of humans, and they're killing 500,000. They have no place on Earth. We just need to. They're like smallpox. We eradicated smallpox. We need to eradicate mosquitoes, right? That's one camp. The other camp is, what will happen? Like, what are the consequences of that? So people are saying like they are biomass that feeds bats and birds. They may be incidental pollinators. They're part of the web of life. We won't know until we do the experiment, right? What side are you on? Kill them all or find another way? Kill them all.
I don't know.
It's like a perfect ethical question. Like, do we get rid of something that currently, like, what about the number? Like in sub-Saharan Africa, over the time that I've talked, like countless babies have died. Do we kill all mosquitoes, or do we find some other way? Show of hands. Kill all mosquitoes.
I'd have to do more research.
Find some other way. I think we got to find some other way. Mostly just because it's not going to work. There's no way that we're smart enough to kill all mosquitoes. Okay, here. Good.
So you said the TRPA1, they can't really detect noxious gases. Would they be more susceptible to pesticides?
Ooh, would TRPA1 animals be more susceptible to pesticides? If they had to taste them, absolutely, because they have perturbations in sensing molecules. Pesticides aren't hot, so I think it would have to be something specific about that chemical. Great question.
Will deforestation help the tropical countries in fighting mosquito population?
What do you think? Why?
They don't have a sustainable habitat.
Well, I mean, so who disagrees with that? So the hypothesis is like, I lost my microphone. So one idea is that deforestation will solve the problem. Get rid of all the trees, get rid of the mosquitoes. What do you think?
I say no, because like all they need is like a little standing water, and like that's enough for them.
Yeah, I think it'd be better, because what happens when you deforest? What happens when you deforest?
Basically, the ecosystem in that forest collapses completely.
Why? But like, what happens when you deforest? Like, I build a huge road. I just bought a house upstate. Like, you build a huge road, what happens? Like, at a really practical level, like, what happens? You build a road. Who comes in? Humans, right? So I think the more you deforest, the more tempting that comes for people to start farming, and then they set up house. There's water. There's people. I think it makes it much worse. All right, Dr. Dengue. I can't resist a very.
Are there any difference in the anatomy of mosquitoes that cause different diseases?
Are there differences in anatomy? I mean, they look really different. So the evolutionary time between the most common ancestor of the malaria mosquito and our mosquito is 160 million years ago. It was the same species, so they've had a long time to change. So malaria mosquitoes look more like arrows. Like they're kind of beautiful. They look very different, but the basic machinery is there. They fly. They have a horrible biting organ. They're incredibly tuned to human scent. So they do look different. Yeah, I mean, I can't take all 400 people to my lab, but but some of you could come see them.
So earlier when you were talking about Zika, you said that we go through periods where it's very everywhere, and then other periods where it's very quiet and not active. Why is that?
Food for thought. Thank you. So it's usually because the population of mosquitoes crashes. So this happens during droughts. So when there's a drought, you have this temporary block in mosquitoes that are flying around infecting. And so then you see this definitely for malaria, like it follows the rainy season. So there'll be some intermission where people are fine. And then it comes back. So that prompts like the next question. What's the next question? What causes the droughts? That's a good question, but like the question related to like the biology of the disease. I'm not formulating it properly. Anybody? What's the next question? So thank you for the initial question. So what's the next? I've already forgotten what the next question is. What's the next question?
You know how if a person has Zika and a mosquito that's not affected by Zika gets that virus, say like a person has leukemia or some sort of blood disease, like does that affect the
So does a blood disease affect a mosquito? There is a case of one particular blood disease is an incredibly useful disease to have when it comes to infectious diseases spread by mosquitoes. So leukemia I don't think is one of them, but anybody know of a disease, a blood disease? Because sorry, this is the questioning.
Sickle cell anemia.
So that's great. So why is sickle cell anemia a great thing to have if you're in an area with malaria?
It prevents the so like the blood cells they have the hemoglobin, the protein is shaped differently due to mutation, and in the person's genome, and so I think what happens is there's a buildup kind of when the mosquito finds a capillary and starts suctioning stuff up. The different shaped blood cells, they kind of build up in there, and the mosquito can't get the blood, so they can't really feed on those people. I think, did I get it right? No, I didn't.
I actually, I think the best thing for a scientist to say is, I don't know. Like, I'm actually not so sure. So I think it may be part of that. I think it's also that the red blood cells are it's really hard for the plasmodium to infect and replicate inside the cells. But I don't know. Does anybody have a more expert answer? But I wanted to get back to gentleman in the front row asked, why does it come and go? So, and I said that there's a drought, but there is an obvious next question that follows, like where did the disease go, right? Where was it? Anybody have any idea? Hey.
Isn't it just in circulation, so
Yep.
in human hosts or in mosquitoes?
Yep. But it has to be, like, let's say that there's a 6-month drought. There's a 6-month drought. I already have a microphone. So there's a 6-month drought. Where is the Zika?
In human hosts, sort of just chilling? I don't know.
Yeah. I think that's right, and that's why people are, I've gotten so many emails. I mean, last year, Ben did something really important. Ben resequenced the genome of Aedes aegypti, which just became public last week. We did that kind of piggybacking on the hysteria, the justified hysteria about Zika, right? Because there was so much of we're like, we need to know something more about this critter that's making microcephalic babies. But I think that the scariest thing was that young couples who'd just been married, who were thinking of having children, maybe on their honeymoon. A typical place to go on a honeymoon is the Caribbean. The Caribbean is just crawling with Zika-infected mosquitoes. People were asking me by email, by phone, is it safe for me to go have my honeymoon in Puerto Rico? Am I going to get infected? And the answer is we don't really know, because then people discovered that a man infected with Zika could transmit it directly without mosquitoes to the woman, and that it was harbored in the man for 4 months. So that would be enough to survive a drought. So that's, we really are set up. It's chilling. I think it's absolutely right. Like it's just dormant in the human, and then the next time the mosquito population awakes when there's water, then everybody's back in business. So, and I think part of what the pathogens do is like they find ways to chill, right? That's what HIV does. That's what TB does. They all are kind of waiting for the right moments. They're terrible. We have 2 there. I don't know how Sean is supposed to yell at me when I'm done. Okay, cool. We'll keep going. Go.
So odor is like an important part in the mosquitoes finding us, obviously. Is that how they communicate, like with other mosquitoes? Do they use odor or other things of communication?
So we don't know. So I think that they're sort of thought of as solitary creatures. They don't build societies like ants or bees or other social insects. We don't find a lot of evidence of any social behavior between females. I don't know if you, but it's males and females. Males are certainly finding females. We don't know whether it's smell. It might be. I always wondered, like, they have such fuzzy antennae. They must be tuning into a female scent. There is no known pheromone. So this is another project. Those of you who want to do a project in your spare time, find the chemical that a female mosquito is releasing. But there's really no evidence that they're not team players. They just go out, try to find a piece of skin and move on. So, gentleman to your left.
Is it true that the ingestion of alcohol causes people to become more desirable to mosquitoes
Yes.
because like the capillaries expand?
Yes, this is a really great paper. So this was a PLOS One paper, probably from 10 years ago, where they asked if anybody here over drinking age? All right. Okay, teacher. There we go. So we give you. I have you sleep in a hut in an experimental hut in Africa. You drink a pint of water. You go to sleep. And we count how many mosquitoes came into the tent. The next night we give you a pint of beer, and we count how many mosquitoes. And there was like a really, really strong increase. Now, why is that? I think it's a great experiment and a crap experiment. Why is it a bad experiment? The gentleman who asked the question. So I give you water or I give you beer, and you're much more attractive when you have beer. Is it the alcohol?
I think it's because like your capillaries expand and the blood flow is increased, but like how are mosquitoes able to sense that before like they feed?
Yeah, I mean that's I think what they want to show, but like what else could it be? Every time you do an experiment, you have to think about like the crappy reason it could be the result. Like what else could it be?
It could just be like their blood flow happens to be like increased that night. It doesn't have to do with the alcohol.
So you're circling back to the same answer, but like what else? What are some other properties of beer? Oh my God, you again! She's like the winner with all the great ideas. Give this woman a scholarship. Okay, I just want to let's explore like why is that a bad experiment? What else does beer do? And thank you for the question. It was a great question. And your biological idea is a great one. But how about some uninteresting reasons why beer makes you more attractive?
Well, beer smells.
Beer smells, exactly. It could just be that it has a yeasty smell. Maybe the smell of human and beer is, right? They didn't control for that. What's another reason why it's a bad experiment?
It has a lot of sugar in it.
Although, our data says it's not sugar, but yeah, sure. It could rapidly change your, what else? Like what else? Those of you who, I'm sure none of you has had a beer, but of course, no high school students drink, but like what else does beer do to you? What else could it be about your behavior if you've had a pint of beer?
You sweat.
You sweat? What else?
Not everyone can drink it.
Yeah. Yeah. Or you could just be like dopey or weird. So but it's true. But is it alcohol? We don't know. They should have given them vodka, right? A real experiment would be to give them vodka to see if it's alcohol. Right? To eliminate the smell. I feel like we got to do more on this side.
So there was this experiment done, and they basically took a trap that worked, and they put dry ice next to the trap, and then the mosquito just went into the dry ice. Like, I don't get it. Dry ice is like freezing. Why were they so attracted to it?
Well, you tell me, what is dry ice?
CO2.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
but
dry
it's
ice is CO2. So it gives off cold, but what else does it give off?
Yeah, CO2.
So they love CO2. They love it.
They like it more than
They love CO2. I think that so it's kind of a distance thing. Like if you have a piece of dry ice, like right next to it, it's really cold, but far away, just because of physics, right? The CO2, they're going to sense the CO2 really far away and fly toward it. Only when they get close to it where they realize it's cold. But again, it's like this. They have to make these value judgments. Like CO2 is a good thing.
But in the same experiment, they tested mosquitoes without the ability to detect whether or not there was a CO2, and they still went towards the dry ice.
Really? Who did that? What? You have to tell me, find me right after this, because I want to know what that paper is, because they had to have used our mutants, right? Anybody on this side? A lot of people do experiments that I think are bad, so that to me sounds like a bad experiment. Do you have a microphone? There you go, now you have a microphone.
Just a very quick question regarding distribution of mosquito attraction. Is skin conductance something that they can detect? Because you can have changes in skin conductance associated with anxiety states.
Absolutely.
And so on. So that may, if they can detect it.
Yep. So in our experiments, they can't detect it because again, there's about a 6-inch gap there's a 6-inch gap between the skin and the closest they can approach it. So in our experiments, all they can really detect is the odor coming off of the skin. But I agree with you that, when they're actually probing and evaluating, they could be evaluating all sorts of properties on the skin. It could be too moist, it could be too dry, it could have things on it like DEET, the insect repellent they don't like. Certainly when people are, there's lots of evidence in human psychology that if you're scared or excited, that you give off, that your sweat smells different. When you have the flu, your sweat smells different. So we haven't evaluated any of those things, and it might be that, again, the females are so desperate that they may not care if you're freaked out or excited or sick, right? We don't know.
Earlier in the way in the beginning of your thing, you said that when you get a mosquito bite, it disappears really quickly.
Yes.
You didn't just why is that?
I'm not an immunologist or a physician, but I think it's just immune tolerance. So it's kind of like we've been initially the antigens that are injected, the local anesthetic, and the anti-clotting factors and the other salivary proteins cause a big immune response. So I'm waving my hands again. So it goes away. So literally the first time I did it, when we first switched to mosquitoes about 10 years ago, I had 3 bites on my hand, and I couldn't sleep for 4 days. It was so itchy, and I was up at night. Now it's temporarily red, and it goes away. So when I'm bitten by another mosquito, like a Culex mosquito in Jersey, I get huge reactions. I think it is like an immune reaction that's specific to the species. I lost my microphone. Now we're ignoring everybody on that side.
So I know we were talking a lot about how certain mosquitoes carry viruses such as Zika and malaria, but
malaria? Is malaria a virus?
No, it's a infectious disease. Is it?
What is? I didn't talk about it, but what is malaria for extra credit? Is it a virus? What kind of critter is it? Bacteria?
Oh, is it a bacteria?
What is it? Keep going up, bigger size. Viruses are small, bacteria.
Bacteria.
I think we have.
What, like some sort of worm, or?
It's like a little tiny protozoan, like a little tiny protozoan parasite. Anyway, but I interrupted you, so go ahead.
Can one mosquito carry more than one virus?
Probably, right? So that's a great question. Malaria mosquitoes do not spread the viruses. Like there is some host specificity. So, but our mosquitoes, people conjecture that in part of the problem with microcephaly in Brazil is that those mosquitoes were co-infected with dengue and Zika. So they absolutely can.
Okay, I just want to know, how big of a role does skin texture have to do with, the attraction between mosquitoes? Because my sister has eczema and she has ichthyosis, and it can't really go through her skin. So.
I mean, this has been interesting. I had never considered texture of skin as a factor, but it is coming up a lot today, and I don't have an answer to it. We haven't looked into it. Most of our studies, we look before they get to the skin, and they don't care. So I don't know whether those factors play a role. I would say that it is in areas where the females are really desperate, they will bite through fabric. So I'm not sure how much of a role it plays, but it might be if you're in an area where there's a lot of people, that they may be making value judgments, like she smells delicious, but I have some other sense that it's going to be more difficult to get at the blood. I don't know, but that's another. It should prompt us to think about this as a factor that we haven't thought about.
So with the changing climate and how it's getting hotter, do you think this is going to impact the mosquito population? Because
what do you think?
I think it will, because when it gets hotter, people sweat, and odor seems to be a very big factor.
Yep. So from the human point of view, we probably are more accessible, but I think the other part is more important. So what does the warming of the planet, how does that impact right now there's no mosquitoes right now living in Washington, D.C. But so how will climate change that?
Well, it
it also would impact sea levels, so that could bring more like standing water into different places.
They don't like to lay
but-
eggs in seawater, but yeah.
Well, not
Yeah.
seawater, but like standing water.
Yep. But like their habitat, like if you don't have a robust local population of Aedes aegypti, you won't get Zika. That's why Miami's got lots of that stuff, because so you just need to warm it up, right? Even though our lab is tightly regulated by the USDA, like if I opened the door today and released all the mosquitoes, we would have no reason to worry. They would all be dead by tomorrow. So it's not, but if it gets warmer, like if we have more temperate winters, they could hang out, they could chill. And so that it would be a problem. I'm not making fun of you. I think it's a fantastic way to think about it. Oh, there's Sean. There's Sean saying no more. What, one more? All right, this has to be the best question. You, sir, this is the best question. It's going to blow us all away.
So the reproductive system, how the female creates the eggs using our blood, could we
Ooh.
somehow interfere with that by putting a chemical in our blood, so once the mosquito sucks the blood up and uses it to create the eggs, it would damage the mechanisms and it wouldn't be able to have children?
That is a fantastic question. Absolutely, yes. So absolutely, there's many points to intervene. Like, so you tell me how it works. Just guess. Have an intuition. Blood goes in. What happens next?
So blood would flow in, and it would take those individual raw resources. It has to refine them, though, so they can be reused.
Right. What's the refinement process? What's the female doing to take blood and turn it into stuff?
Well, it's taking the individual. Well, it's like filtering it,
Yep.
and it takes the individual segments, so the lipids.
Yep.
And it would use that to, I guess, create the egg. So it would create.
But you
the
have like a
membrane.
huge protein, like in your blood. You have like we talked about hemoglobin. You have hemoglobin. They can't shove hemoglobin through the transporters into the ovary. Like what you talked about what you used really good words. There's some processing step. Like what is the processing step to go from big proteins to amino acids? An enzyme?
You'd have to hydrolyze it, where you'd have to add water and break the bond.
Yeah. Proteases. So if you put a protease inhibitor, we all take protease inhibitors in our blood altruistically, and then we make them sterile. I love it. It's a great idea. With that, I hope you enjoy your blood-free lunch.